trillion. I mean, what does that number even mean? It's so huge, it's hard to wrap your head around it. Well, what if I told you that's the high-end estimate from the UN for the amount of money laundered around the world every single year? It's just a staggering reminder of this constant global battle that's happening right under our noses. And that really gets to the heart of what we're talking about today. See, the law is always playing catch-up. It's in this perpetual arms race with corporate crime. The rules we have, they're almost always reactive. They're basically written on the wreckage of the last big disaster. And in the UK, a whole series of scandals have forced this really dramatic and honestly painful reckoning. So for decades, the biggest companies had this incredible legal shield. It was called the identification doctrine. And what it meant was, to convict a company of a crime, prosecutors had to prove that the very top brass, the directing mind and will, the board of directors, were directly involved. Now think about a massive multinational corporation. Proving that is, well, it's next to impossible, right? And what this did was create this sort of shield of impunity, where all kinds of wrongdoing could just fester for years and years. Okay, so let's dive into our first pillar of this systemic failure. And it's all about a breakdown in corporate ethics. The perfect example, one of Britain's most prestigious, most respected industrial champions. We're talking about the Rolls-Royce bribery scandal, which is just a textbook case of how a deeply corrupt culture can hide in plain sight for, well, for decades. And what's really striking when you look into this is just how methodical it all was. This wasn't some rogue employee making a bad decision. No, this was a global business strategy. For more than 20 years, everywhere from Indonesia to Brazil, Rolls-Royce used this same four-step blueprint to bribe its way into getting these huge, lucrative contracts. It was literally baked into their business model. So, what was the price tag when they finally got caught? A cool £671 million. But here's the kicker. This was paid through something called a deferred prosecution agreement, a DPA. And what that is basically a deal. The company avoids a criminal conviction, and in return, they pay a massive fine and promise, to clean up their act. But you have to ask, is that really justice? Even the judge who approved to the deal was wrestling with that very question. His words here just capture the tension perfectly. The argument against a full prosecution was that it could seriously harm the UK economy, essentially making Rolls-Royce too big to jail. And that decision, well, it set a really controversial precedent for corporate accountability in the UK. All right, let's move on to our second pillar, and this one is a catastrophic failure of market integrity. We're talking about the LIBOR scandal. Now, you might have heard of LIBOR, but it's hard to overstate its importance. This was arguably the world's most important number. It set interest rates for something like $400 trillion in financial products. Just an unbelievable figure. So, why was it being manipulated? Well, it turns out there were two really powerful forces at play. The first was just old-fashioned greed. You had traders colluding with each other to just nudge the rate a tiny bit to boost their own profits. But then, during the 2008 financial crisis, a whole other motive took over: fear. Banks started deliberately submitting artificially low rates to hide how weak they actually were, basically deceiving the entire world about the health of the financial system. And how do we know this was happening? We know because of the traders' own words. Investigators uncovered these chat logs, and they were just filled with these shameless, brazen requests to fix the rate. It was the smoking gun. It confirmed everyone's worst fears, that the whole system was rigged by this little club of insiders who acted like they were completely above the law. The fallout from this was so massive, so total, that regulators came to a stunning conclusion. LIBOR couldn't be fixed. It had to be completely dismantled. The entire global financial system then had to spend a whole decade, transitioning away from it. And you have to understand, this wasn't just some minor regulatory tweak. This was a stunning admission that the old model, the idea that the industry could regulate itself, had been a complete and utter failure. Okay, our third and final pillar, and this one is maybe the most profound and the most cruel. It's a failure of justice and of governance. This is the story of how a trusted, state-owned institution literally waged a campaign of terror against its own people, all based on the data coming out of a faulty IT system. The scale of the injustice here is it's staggering. We're talking about more than 900 innocent sub-postmasters who were wrongfully prosecuted. All of them prosecuted based on flawed data from an IT system called Horizon. And the cruelest part? Each and every one of them was told they were the only one having these problems. It was a flat-out lie. And behind that number, behind 900 plus, are hundreds of completely destroyed lives. Take the story of Seema Mishra, just one example. She was a pregnant mother of 2, and she was jailed on her son's 10th birthday for money that was never even missing. People lost everything, their homes, their life savings, their reputations, and tragically, some people even lost their lives over this. But the victims, they fought back. And it took a relentless, decade-long fight against just a complete wall of institutional denial to get anywhere. It took a massive high court battle to finally prove, once and for all, that the Horizon system was riddled with bugs and defects. And that victory completely shattered the post office's story, forcing Parliament to take this incredible, unprecedented step of clearing the names of hundreds of victims with a single act of law. So let's step back for a second and pull these 3 stories together, because when you lay them out side by side like this, a really clear pattern starts to emerge, doesn't it? You've got corporate bribery with Rolls-Royce, you've got market rigging with LIBOR, and you've got wrongful prosecutions by the post office. Each one of these scandals exposed a totally different but completely fundamental weakness in the system. And the combined effect of all this, absolutely devastating. You can think of it as a 3-front attack on public trust. Rolls-Royce, that eroded our faith in corporate Britain. LIBOR, that shattered trust in the city and global finance. And the post office, well, that destroyed trust in the state itself, in the very idea of justice. So how did the lawmakers respond to all this? Well, it's exactly what we talked about at the very beginning. They reacted. The Bribery Act gets passed, and it's immediately tested by the Rolls-Royce case. The Financial Services Act, that was a direct response to the LIBOR scandal. Each new law is basically legislative scar tissue, forming over the wound of the last disaster. So, where does this battle go from here? Well, we're now in a full-blown technological arms race. On one side, you have criminals using things like AI for deep fake frauds and cryptocurrency for money laundering. And on the other side, you have the institutions deploying their own AI and machine learning tools to try and fight back. But here's the thing. Technology is not a silver bullet. If the post office scandal proved anything, it's that. The real weak point might actually be our human defenses. I mean, in the UK, the main law to protect whistleblowers dates all the way back to 1998. It's dangerously outdated. It completely fails to protect the very people who are often our first and sometimes our only line of defense against the next huge scandal. And all of this brings us to our final, and I think most crucial question. As we keep building more rules and developing smarter tech, we really have to ask ourselves, is it enough? Or does preventing the next massive systemic failure depend less on laws and algorithms and more on something more fundamental? Something like a real shift in corporate culture, genuine accountability, and maybe, just maybe, a renewed focus on simple human integrity?